On April 20th, the backlash against Disney's activism and attempt at ideopolitical interference in Florida state legislation was escalated to a whole new level, after the Florida Senate passed a bill which would terminate the Reedy Creek Improvement District. I'll get back to exactly what that means, but to give you a visual, it is not pushing the red nuclear button. It is, however, punching in one of the two sets of launch codes which arms and activates the red nuclear button. The bill passing in the House on April 21st was the second set of launch codes being punched in, so now the red nuclear button is, for all intents and purposes, armed and activated, but as we shall see, it has not yet been pushed. Since every video is someone's first video, we will as always begin by establishing some context, and go through the cliffnotes version of how Disney and the state of Florida could get to this point. Then I'll go through what terminating the Reedy Creek Improvement District means in practical terms, before presenting two possible scenarios on how this might play out going forward. If that kind of analysis sounds good to you, then please hit that like, subscribe, and indicate you want notifications on all videos, because this is what we do. If you are a returning subscriber, then please take a moment to check that you are indeed still subscribed and still set to receive notifications, because this platform has recently altered subscription and notification status for a good number of regular viewers of independent channels such as this one. With that said, let's dive in and see how Disney and the state of Florida could get to this point. During the reign of Disney's previous CEO, Bob Iger, the company was, perhaps intentionally, filled up with ideopolitical activists at all levels, including at the executive level. This contributed towards shifting Disney programming from politically neutral to all-out activist, much to the dismay of the real storytellers and true believers that were already there. The loss of revenue from this activism, as well as some of Iger's investments that didn't pan out as planned, enabled a number of major shareholders to install Bob Chapek as the new CEO to replace Bob Iger. But since Iger had filled the company with so many activists that Disney simply couldn't function if they all were to be purged in one fell swoop, Chapek instead added new levels of bureaucracy aimed at keeping them in check, all while announcing his intention to move Disney back to politically neutral. But the activists did not take kindly to that, and organized their own resistance movement, doing petitions and what have you not, waiting for something big that could be weaponized. And they soon found it in Florida's Parental Rights in Education bill, which applies to years 1 to 3 of elementary school. While the bill does place restrictions on sexual instruction, it is fundamentally about transparency, meaning parents have to be informed about what their children ages 5 to 9 are being taught. For purely politically partisan purposes, this bill has been given another nickname in the establishment news channels. While this nickname is a wild misrepresentation of what the bill actually is about, it does serve to drive the activists into a frenzy. Since Chapek was trying to steer Disney back to a politically neutral position, Disney initially had no position on the bill, and rightfully so, and I'll soon get back to why rightfully so is indeed the appropriate term. But when Chapek wouldn't use Disney's economic influence in the state of Florida as a means to oppose and stop this bill, the activists rebelled and more or less held the corporation hostage. Even after Chapek gave in to their initial demands, they organized walkouts and, for all intents and purposes, demanded that Disney reverse Chapek's course towards political neutrality and instead go all in on ideopolitical activism. Among other things, they demanded Disney put the full might of its economic power behind interfering in Florida politics and have the bill reversed. A closed town hall meeting was even held in Disney, and here the activists bragged to each other on camera about all the messaging they had included into various Disney programming, all while agreeing that much more was needed. There was even a hostage video of Chapek himself, in which he seemingly fully surrendered to their demands. Again, and this cannot be stressed enough, this was a closed town hall meeting. No outsiders were allowed. Nothing was supposed to be released to the public. This was the activists celebrating their victory, but no outsiders, let alone Disney's audience, were ever supposed to learn of what the activists proudly referred to as an agenda. The reason we know of this anyway is because the most incendiary and most revealing clips, the very last ones the activist would ever want the public to see, were very strategically leaked to the public. Remember when I described Chapek not initially having a position on the bill as rightfully so? Now, let's get into why. Some of you listening may have bought into the establishment media-driven narrative of what the bill supposedly is about. If you bought into that, you may also believe that by publicly opposing it, like they did after being held hostage by a portion of their own employees, Disney has stood up against hate. Well, not quite. Go back to the bill's actual wording and intent, and you'll find that by publicly opposing it, Disney actually took the stance that Florida children who are barely out of diapers not only should receive sexual instruction, but more importantly, that the detailed nature of that instruction should be concealed from the parents. Because that is the reality of the stance one takes by opposing the parental rights in education bill. This, combined with the leaked clips from that internal town hall, means that to anyone paying attention and reading more than just headlines, Disney's perception as a family-friendly company has been shattered, which has no doubt precipitated what we are now hearing is more than 1 million Disney Plus cancellations. It could even be several million, as by all outwardly measures, HBO Max has now overtaken Disney Plus. There are many layers to this backlash, ranging from Texas considering withdrawing their pension funds to the Mickey Mouse copyright extension being blocked. And I recommend you check out our previous video for more details on that. All of this has caused the Disney share price to nosedive, but for now, let's focus on the by far most serious backlash. Namely, Florida lawmakers responding to Disney's newfound activist interference in Florida politics by repealing the Reedy Creek Improvement Act. Ever since the 1967 Reedy Creek Improvement Act, the Disney World Resort has been allowed to run more or less like an independent nation on Florida soil, governing themselves. This act was intended to facilitate Disney in building their city of the future, which they in the end did not do. Instead, this city of the future transformed into the Epcot Center, which will come back to haunt them in a possible future lawsuit. But that aside, this act always gave Disney a major competitive advantage, as it provides considerable tax benefits, as well as exemption from the rules and regulations that all other resorts and companies operating in the state are subject to. This is an exemption which applies to Disney and to Disney only. Universal Studios Orlando doesn't have this, nor does any other Florida theme park. They all have to operate under normal Florida legislation, pay the normal Florida taxes, and abide by normal Florida health and safety regulations. What that means is that by repealing the Reedy Creek Improvement Act, Florida lawmakers aren't creating new legislation aimed at persecuting Disney, as some say. Instead, it simply means that Disney will have to operate under the exact same terms that Universal Studios and everyone else have been subject to the whole time. To put it in terms the activist may understand, this isn't persecution, but leveling the playing field by revoking Disney's special privilege. Here's the thing though, Disney World is the biggest theme park on the planet, not just by a wide margin, but by orders of magnitude. Case in point, you could fit 50 Universal Orlando resorts inside of Disney World and still have plenty of room to spare. But all of the other Florida resorts and theme parks were always scaled to operate under Florida legislation. Disney World alone was, in part, scaled to operate under the conditions of the Reedy Creek Improvement Act. Change those conditions, and Disney will be in for a rude awakening. There are those who believe that Disney can just pack up and leave, and simply move Disney World to another state. But let me disabuse you of that notion right away. It can't be done. That is, Disney can, at great expense, make new resorts elsewhere. But compared to Disney World, they would all be scaled-down Lilliput versions. Disney World proper cannot be moved. Nor can something else the scale of Disney World, which was built over the course of decades, ever be constructed anywhere again. Disney World is in every way unique, and it is impossible to overstate its importance to the Disney Corporation as a whole. Now, there are some who mistakenly believe that this might actually end up benefiting Disney, because if the state of Florida were to assume Reedy Creek assets and liabilities, they might actually end up relieving Disney of their debt. Well, if it was as simple as that, then as WDW Pro over at that Park Place points out, Disney's board and shareholders wouldn't be so violently opposed to this, and we would not be getting reports of utter bedlam in Disney's upper echelons. No, this is the nuclear option, and the warheads are aimed squarely at Disney. With this passing in both Florida Senate and House, the launch codes have been entered, and the red nuclear button has been activated. But it is not scheduled to be pushed until June 1st of 2023, when the act takes effect. Between now and then, there are a number of scenarios that could play out, and all of them depend on what has already happened behind the scenes at Disney. Call it Schrödinger's mouse, because just like the physics thought experiment made famous by Schrödinger's cat, there are two main possible states of affairs that could be going on here, each of them mutually exclusive. And we on the outside won't know which state of affair is in effect for some time yet, because outwardly, from our vantage point, they still both look the same. One of these scenarios is that Bob Chapek is playing a high-stakes game of 4D chess. The other is that he is in way over his head and is the one being played. Let's explore each scenario. For the last few years, there has been a cold civil war going on at all levels in Disney between Iger's ideologues and the true believers. This is also true for the board, and the reason why Chapek seemingly may have capitulated to the activists in the first place is because he didn't have the necessary board support to take them on in a frontal assault. What he in this scenario could do, though, is demonstrate to the board why Disney has to be politically neutral. And the best way to do that is by making a strategic retreat and seemingly give in to the activist demands, and then let the board see what might happen when Disney goes all in on partisan activism. Remember how I said that those clips of Disney activists bragging about their agenda was never meant to be seen by the public? Well, somehow the most incendiary bits strategically ended up getting leaked to the public and going viral. And together with Chapek's hostage video giving in to the activist demands, this directly led to an onslaught of backlash that threatens every single element of Disney's business on all fronts, all at the same time. This could very well be the worst situation Disney has faced in the history of the company. But in all this backlash, there still is nothing that has happened that can't be walked back. Texas still haven't withdrawn the state retirement fund. Mickey Mouse has not yet been made public domain, and DeSantis still has not pushed the nuclear button. All of this will happen if Disney continues down the path they currently are on, and the board should see that by now. But it doesn't have to happen, not if Disney reverses their present course. If the board was to grant CEO Bob Chapek the support he needs to do what must be done internally in the company, he would afterwards be able to patch things up with Florida and everyone else, before any lasting damage is done. You see, DeSantis already got his political win. He may not even actually want to push the nuclear button. Oh, he would do it, I'm not saying otherwise. But if Disney were to go back to being a for-profit company and restrict their meddling to purely financial and tax issues, it would be so much easier and so much more practical not to push that button. Spin it right, and DeSantis could even get another political win out of it. While within Disney, Chapek would become the CEO who snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, and pulled Disney out of the worst crisis the company ever faced. A win-win for all involved. It couldn't have worked out better for Chapek and DeSantis if they had planned it. The only ones who lose under this scenario are Iger's activists. But I keep calling this a scenario, because this might not be what is going on. There is another scenario too. Under this scenario, Chapek did not make any kind of strategic retreat. He genuinely capitulated to the activists, even if that means he failed at the one job he was hired to do. In having capitulated, Chapek decided to scrap everything his leadership was built around, namely returning Disney to profitability by returning to political neutrality, instead allowing Disney to be used as a tool for activism. But then all this backlash happened around him, and now he's just a passive witness to it. There's nothing he can do to stop it. Disney will continue down the path of activism, and Bob Iger, the one whose activists are behind it all, could very well return, as he has been positioning himself to do, to thunderous applause from Hollywood. Meanwhile, for the failure that happened under his watch, Bob Chapek would never be the CEO of anything bigger than a soda stand ever again. At this point in time, these two very different scenarios outwardly look exactly the same. It is what happens in the next few weeks and months that will reveal which of the two scenarios is actually playing out. We will, of course, keep you up to date as things develop. To make sure you don't miss out on updates, please like this video, subscribe, and indicate you want notifications on all videos. For now, which scenario do you think is more likely to be accurate? And do you think DeSantis really will hit the red button come June of next year? Let me know in the comments.